Good evening, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to the City of Hermantown Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Tonight is September 20th, 2022. It's currently 7 o'clock in the evening. We're going to open this meeting with a roll call of members. Myself, Corey Colquist, here. Valerie Ouellette, Samuel Clark, here. Beth Winsloff, not here. Buckley Simmons, here. Dante Tomasani, here. And John Geisler. Second up this evening is an approval of the agenda this evening. Can I get a motion, please? Thank you for that. Can I get a second? Second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes. The third this evening is the approval of the minutes from the August 16th, 2022 regular meeting. Can I get a motion on that, please?
Move. Approve.
Thank you for that. Can I get a second?
Colquist with the second.
Thank you for that. All in favor? Aye. Aye. That motion passes. Number 4 this evening is a public discussion. We welcome public comment on anything that's not on this evening's agenda. So if you're here tonight to talk about something that's not on the agenda, this is the time to do so. Anybody want to come up for anything that's not on the agenda? Perfect. Thank you for that. We will move on from number 4. Number 5 is this evening's listed public hearings. We have 5A. It's an application by Blue Moon Properties / Rob Stauber for a subdivision to create a 135-foot wide parcel of 1 acres and a 3.89 acre lot accessed by the way of a flag lot of 31.75 foot in width at 5140 Morris Thomas Road. The property is located in an R3 zoning district. Eric, what do you have for us on this?
Great, thank you very much. And if I could ask Mr. Wickland in the back to maybe reference a couple of these for site purposes so people can see on a location map that way. So as he's doing that, what's before us this evening, this is a 5-acre lot that's being requested to being split into a flag lot. Basically the parent lot where the house would exist is approximately 1.1 acres in size, with the flag lot being 3.89 acres in size. As you can see here on the screen, this is the location of the property there in the red, just a little bit off that intersection of Morris Thomas and Levake Road. Wagner Road is an extremely deep lot, and Wagner Road basically on the southern portion of this lot, and Morris Thomas is on the north. The flag lot location would take access from Morris Thomas Road. Some of you who have been on this board for a while may recall this property. This actually was approved for a flag lot back in 19/20. At that time, received the approval. However, the property owner / applicant at the time did not finalize the paperwork for the creation of this lot split. They did go as far as basically creating a driveway and a pad in the back, which they were able to do, but they never finalized the paperwork to split the property. This property now has since changed hands a couple different times with the new applicant before us, Blue Moon Properties / Rob Stauber, looking to essentially recreate that flag lot once again here. Just to help everybody out, how we look at a flag lot, we basically break it into 2 pieces. There's the pole, which is the portion which contains the driveway as well as any utilities associated with it. City minimum requirements are 30-foot width on that pole portion and a maximum of 500-foot length. And in this case, there's 31.75 feet of frontage along Morris Thomas, and the pole is a depth of 375 feet. So both of them are within those ranges associated with those dimensional requirements. And then the flag lot portion, that's where the actual building pad is, and the subsequent setbacks take place from that. It's 3.6 acres. In this zoning district, it just has to be a minimum of 0.5 acres. So it's obviously much greater than that. The existing home is connected to city utilities, and the property or the property owner and future person has indicated that they have a preference to connect to city utilities for this new flag lot. And it would be utilized for a single family house in the future.
Thank you for that, Eric. Commission members, any questions or comments so far on 5A?
I'm just a little confused. Frontage is off of Morris Thomas, yet the building is referencing 43XX Levake Road. The house that's to go on there? I'm not clear. If you go to the next slide where it shows the drawing of the home. One more up. That one.
And I apologize, we had a snafu at staff level. These drawings do not apply to this application.
Okay, right, okay. That makes sense.
All it is that drawing right before it, showing the plan split.
Okay,
There you go.
all right, perfect.
So it's either be some confusion on that part.
Commission members, any other questions or comments so far before we look to hear from the applicant? Not hearing any. Is the applicant here this evening? Do you have anything you'd like to say or add to Eric's presentation? If you do, please come on up and state your name and address for the record.
Rob Stauber, 4860 Breezy Point Road, Island Lake. Obviously, Eric did a great job. It was pretty clear there. When I looked at buying the property, I took a walk along it and it wasn't too exciting. I call it the little red house. It looks like it needs a little work. And as I walked down that driveway, I could tell somebody had put in some considerable work back there, and it was obvious to me a house should be there. So that's really all I have to say is I think Eric did a great job, and it's set up perfectly for what I would call a beautiful home back there. Thank you.
Perfect, sir. Thank you. Commission members, any questions for the applicant this evening? Eric, anything else on this one this evening?
No, there is not.
Thank you for that. We're going to open up the floor for a public hearing at 7:07. Would anybody like to come up and speak on 5A this evening? If you'd like to come up and talk about this potential flag lot, please come on up and do so. Not seeing any, we'll close the public hearing as well at 7:07 p.m. Commission members, one last chance for questions or comments. Not hearing any, I look for a motion on 5A, please.
Mr. Chair, seeing both lots meet the requirements for a flag lot, I move to approve agenda item 5A as stated.
Thank you for that. Can we get a second?
Simmons with a second.
Thank you for that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? 5A passes. Thank you very much, sir. Moving on this evening to 5B. It's an application by Sumas Construction, Inc. for a special use permit for the construction of a twin home / duplex at an address on Stebner Road. The property is located in an R3 residential zoning district. Eric, what do you have for us on this one?
Great, thank you. Once again, if I could ask Mr. Wickland to get the location map associated with this one. This is a existing lot that had been on the market for last few months here. It straddles Stebner Road associated with it. There's an existing home on the west side and this vacant lot essentially on the east side. What the applicant was able to do is they also purchased some land to the north and was able to reconfigure this essentially property into potentially two lots. One would be a single family lot that there's no approvals associated with, but the other one would be a two-family home lot that we're here this evening for the special use permit. So for two-family lots, they are allowed in the R3 zoning district. However, they have greater requirements as far as side yard setbacks associated with that. In the case of, once again, two-family homes, they require a minimum of a 40-foot setback from the side yard, and the front and the rear yards remain the same. 50 feet in the front, 40 feet in the rear. The lots are required to be larger in size as well. They're required to be 1 acre in size versus a ½ acre, which is a standard R3 zoning that way. In both the cases of the setbacks, the proposed setbacks for the two-family home this evening is 46 feet on both sides, and the lot size is approximately 1.5 acres. So they do exceed that acreage and the setbacks associated with it. As I'd mentioned, two-family homes do require a special use permit. Basically, in this case, the Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory board to the City Council. The City Council then would provide the ultimate decision associated with that. There are wetlands, at least for the National Wetland Inventory, located on the front portion of the site, basically along that frontage on Stebner. The applicant has provided a wetland delineation that's going to be reviewed in the field this coming Monday for that. So any impacts associated with wetland disturbance, primarily for the driveway, those would have to receive approval through the Hermantown Technical Evaluation Panel. So it's a pretty standard process that way. And that portion of the wetlands will be accomplished prior to this getting in front of City Council.
Thank you for that, Eric. Commission members, any questions or comments so far this evening on 5B?
Mr. Chair, I got a quick question for Eric. Do we expect any wetland filling for the driveways to be meet under the de minimis exception?
I think the way we're looking is they may have to get credits for that. Yeah, it's because there's not much wetlands on this property that more than likely they may end up into a credit situation.
But we will know that before.
Yes, we will, exactly. But there is upland, basically the buildable area on the east side of the property that seems to be more than enough for the placement of the home.
Thank you for that, Councilor Geisler. Commission members, any other questions before we look to hear from the applicant this evening? Not seeing any. Is the applicant here this evening? Sir, is there anything you'd like to add to Eric's presentation this evening? If so, please come on up and state your name and address at the for the record. I personally don't have any questions for you at this moment, but we'll find out. Commission members, any questions that might be addressed towards the applicant before we hear from anybody at a public hearing? Not seeing any at this moment. We'll open the floor at 7:11 in the evening for a public hearing on 5B. Is anybody here this evening to speak on this application? Not seeing any. We're going to close it at 7:12 p.m. Commission members, again, this is your chance for questions or comments on 5B. Not hearing any, I look for a motion on 5B this evening.
I'd move to approve item 5B as stated.
Thank you very much for that. Can we get a second?
Clark with the second.
Thank you for that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Not hearing any, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to 5C this evening is an application by Titan Premier LLC for a preliminary and final plat for the subdivision of 25 acres into 4 lots. The property is located at 5639 Maple Grove Road and is located in an S1 residential zoning district. Eric, what do you have for us on this one?
Great, thank you. This property did have an existing home on it up until about 6-8 months ago. The property had been for sale for some time. The previous owner, as part of that, had the home demolished just to try to attract a little bit more interest in the purchase of the property. The applicant before us this evening, Titan Premier, did purchase this property earlier this summer. It's 25 acres total. It comprises 2 different properties over there and that land portion. This land is located in an S1 zoning district. The applicant looked at a number of different iterations on how this lot could potentially be subdivided and finally came up with what you see before us this evening. So there are 4 lots proposed for us. Each lot meet the minimum requirements of 5 acres in size. 3 of the 4 lots do have 300 feet of road frontage along Maple Grove Road. And 1 lot is a flag lot, just like we previously spoke about, that will have 30 feet of road frontage along Maple Grove Road. We'll have 500 feet of depth on that pole, as I explained earlier. And then the portion behind that will be 5 acres, just like we had talked about previously. So like I said, the proposed flag lot does meet the city requirements associated with this. These will each have private well and septic systems for those. There are no city utilities in this portion of the city. There's no required roadway work associated with it. There'll just be driveway permits, which the applicant or the builders will need to get through St. Louis County. And no required stormwater pond, as these are just individual building sites and with no new road infrastructure that way. Traditionally, something like this could be accomplished from an administrative standpoint, but it's before us this evening in the form of a plat for 2 reasons. One, it's a Torrens property versus an abstract, which requires a little bit higher degree of survey work. And then secondly, with that flag lot. So it's incorporated into a plat to see before the planning zone this evening.
Thank you very much, Eric. Commission members, any questions or comments for Eric so far this evening on 5C? Not hearing any. Is the applicant here this evening? No? Okay. Nobody to hear from for that.
I know that the applicant does split time between, he is originally from Hermantown. He does have a home in Texas. He tries to come up here every so often. So I believe he was going to try to join us via Zoom, but apparently was not able to make it.
Perfect. Commission members, any questions or comments on 5C this evening, the split of this 25 acres into 4 lots?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a question for Eric. The pole cannot exceed 500 feet, is that correct? What is the length of the pole on this one?
This one does come in right at 500.
Right at 500?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, the S1, it's those are pretty difficult usually to achieve flag lots out of. But in this case, just with the depth of the property, he was able to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Commission members, any other questions before we open it up for a public hearing?
I'm not seeing the map split into the separate lots. Do I not have that? Okay, all right, I see it now.
34.
Gotcha.
Packet.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
No, no problem.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's a little bit out of order.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yeah.
what I'm getting confused here with this. Okay, I got it.
Commission members, any other questions for Eric on this before we open it up for a public hearing? Not hearing any, we'll open up the floor for a public hearing on 5C this evening. It's currently 7:17 in the evening. If anybody would like to come on up and talk about this lot division, please come on up and do so. Not seeing any, we'll close the public hearing at 7:17 PM on 5C. Commission members, last chance for questions or comments on 5C this evening. Not hearing any, I look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve agenda item 5C as stated.
Thank you for that. Can we get a second?
Simmons with a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Not hearing any, motion passes. 5D this evening is an application by Bethany Cemetery Association for a rezoning of an 8.1 acre parcel located at 4938 Hermantown Road. The parcel is currently zoned P public with a proposed rezoning to R3 residential. Eric, what do you have for us on this one?
Great, thank you very much. The Bethany Cemetery Association owns 2 parcels associated with that cemetery. It's and Joe, maybe if you can get the location map up on this one again too, please. So while he's doing that, on the westernmost parcel associated with this, that's primarily where the cemetery, next one still, please, Joe. That is where generally the cemetery is located, headstones, et cetera, that way. The western portion of this other property, that's where the driveway entrance comes into the cemetery per se. So actually what you have, thank you, Joe. Why don't you go up one slide again, please? Thank you. So what we're looking at there, area in red where it says site, that's the proposed 8 acres that the Cemetery Association is looking to rezone from P public to R3. That is an area of land that is unused by the cemetery. They're looking at divesting themselves of some property, which has happened in a couple other of our cemeteries in the city here as well, that these cemeteries are starting to find that they don't need as much land as they once thought they did. And at least the Cemetery Association, trying to look into the future as best they can, do not see a need for this property that way. So what they're looking to do is a couple different steps. The first one this evening before us is a rezoning of this property from P public to the R3 residential. After that, assuming that is approved, they would then market this site for potential home development associated with it. What they just prefer to do is just market the entire 8.1 acres as one lot. Someone could come in the future and subdivide this further into individual lot sites or just leave it as one lot as well that way. So if there's a simple lot subdivision, that would be handled at a staff level. But any splitting of this property into more than 3 new homes, or excuse me, actually more than 4 new lots would come back to planning and zoning and city council. So if there was end up like a plat that would happen for this for a subdivision of 5 or 6 lots, it would come back to this group and require city council review and approval. If it turned into anything else, it would come back to this group for a review and approval that way. There are no applications for this site. Right now, the Cemetery Association is just looking to divest themselves of property. So this is the only discussions I've ever had on this property. No one's ever attacked or at least contacted me saying, I really want to develop this site. So right now, this is strictly a lot subdivision associated with that. Actually, I go back. This is a rezoning request. Assuming the rezoning request eventually goes through the city council process, then it would be administratively split into that 8.1 acre property.
Thank you for that, Eric. Can I ask a couple of questions? What do you have for utilities there in Stebner Road?
There are utilities located on, I believe that the sanitary is on the west side, and I think water is on the east side.
Okay.
But there is existing utilities within that roadway.
Do you know if there's gas in there too?
I do not know that.
Okay. And it looks like the lot's not super deep. It looks like it's about 300 feet deep and
Approximately
1,200 long.
at 251 according to Mr. Geisler, and it's approximately 1,200 feet long. There is, at least for the National Wetland Inventory, generally the lower quarter of this 8.1 acre lot, so plus or minus 2 acres, is showing up as wetland per the National Wetland Inventory.
Thank you for that. I think those are my preliminary questions. Commission members, any questions or comments for Eric on this potential rezoning this evening?
Eric, just to clarify, everything else around the public land is R3 currently?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
And Eric, can you remind us with utilities, what is the minimum lot size?
The minimum lot size, assuming there's both city sewer and water, it's a ½ acre in size and a minimum of 100 feet of road frontage.
Conceivably not including the wetlands, 10 or 12 home sites.
Exactly. If you just split this land up dimensionally, yes, it'd approximately be 12 home sites associated with that.
It looks like there's 9 across the street from it.
That's what I counted as
5,
well.
6, 7, 8, 9. Okay.
Eric, just without getting into it too deep, since we talked about it last meeting quite a bit, in terms of rezoning versus just selling the property and opportunity for a future buyer, could you sell this 8 acres or 8.1 acres and the future buyer propose maybe like a PUD or something along those lines?
They could, they'd be buying it at their own risk. And that's the advantage of rezoning a property prior, is a potential buyer would know what they have. Otherwise, they'd be buying 8.1 acres of publicly zoned land that essentially can be used for a cemetery or an airport or very limited type of things. The park, exactly. So you'd definitely be a buyer beware situation. So that's generally why this is a process that we pursue first, is you do a rezoning, then you do any land splits associated with it. And as I said before, if this came in for multiple lot splits, it would come before this group as a plat. If it came before here as a PUD, it would come before this group as that. So there is a process that go forward if something happened other than 3 new single family homes on that property.
Thank you for those clarifications. Commission members, any other questions or comments for Eric before we open up the floor?
I just had one other question, since it seems like things kind of come, when something comes up, it seems like it comes up again, and it seems like it happens a lot. But in terms of rezoning, how often does that happen historically in the city of Hermantown?
I've been here almost 7 years, and prior to this year, I think we had 1. So like I said, that the 2 that we've had 3 this year, 2 of them have been cemeteries. Once again, looking to divest themselves of land. One was hard on the corner at Arrowhead and Stebner. We rezoned that to commercial, and we approved a dental clinic over there. And this one before us this evening, from the P to R3, and then obviously the one that happened last month, from the R3 to the C. So those are the 3 that And they said I really had but one prior to that. So. And what I've been hearing in the works is another cemetery might be looking at the exact same thing.
When I can see, you know, with a cemetery property or a publicly zoned property like this, I guess my overall concern, because we talked about it last week, is that if the precedent is as soon as a developer or anyone wants to change what a property is zoned and it's just approved, it kind of defeats the purpose of zoning in the first place. So that's just my overarching concern with rezoning versus looking into other options first.
Right, and I believe this one's a little different because it's starting out as P public, like you
True.
stated.
Yep.
This
So-
one's
So I'm
completely
not- I'm
different.
not saying this is like my
Sure,
blanket
yep.
opinion, but it's kind of the underlying concern with rezoning versus doing something.
Commission members, any other questions or comments? Not seeing any right now. We'll open up the floor for a public hearing at 7:26. If you'd like to speak on 5D this evening, please come on up, state your name and address for the record. Hi there.
3785 Stebner Road. On your map there, I'm the L-shaped lot on the Stebner Road. We built about 25 years ago there, and we were told that we were a wetland and we got a special use permit. And my brother owns the properties next to us, and they told us that maybe those lots would be buildable, and they allowed him to put in driveway entrances there. And then they said the end of the road, the end of the road is unbuildable and it is wetland, and that was told to us by John Clares, Lynn Landers, and David Salo. They all told me that. They said that is zone public, it will never change. Public zonings are for utilities and for all these other things. And then in 2015, when a neighbor that's in my backyard purchased property, apparently the city realized that my house was zoned public and the house he was buying was zoned public. And so I can pass this around, but this used to be zoned much larger public here. And so at that time, they rezoned my house. This was all there. They rezoned our house, and then they rezoned my brother's land next to us. And they said the rest of the road or the rest of the property on the Stebner Road is wetland. It will never be buildable. Nobody would ever approve that. And so they left it as a P. And then they also rezoned the property that my backyard new neighbor purchased. And so it wasn't always R3 around this property. It was P. And in 2015, when we came to the meeting, I don't know if you have minutes kept or something, but I said, seems like something a little fishy is going on here, because if you change mine to R3, what's to say you're not going to just keep going down and changing everything to R3? And they said that will always be left P, especially because it's on the corner for utilities. But backing up, my great-grandfather, his name was Pete Olson, and he donated the land that we're talking about today for the cemetery. And so I have a personal connection to this because I was planning on being buried in that cemetery. And I think it's going to really affect the cemetery. I don't know if any of you have gone to that cemetery. It's a beautiful cemetery. It's a beautiful piece of land. It's peaceful, it's tranquil. There's bear, deers, squirrel, everything running around there. And it's secluded and private. And if you put public homes in front of that cemetery, you're going to have, I mean, the veterans ceremonies are there every Memorial Day. It's a pride. I'm not here because of my house being down the street. Anything you build would probably add to the value of my home. I am here because my grandpa donated that land for the cemetery. And that was the purpose of his donation, is to give that land to the cemetery. And he was not a wealthy man. He was the first dairy farm in Hermantown. And the fact that he donated that land for the cemetery and for the public. There used to be a ball field on the corner there of Hermantown and Stebner, and that's where all the kids in the neighborhood would gather. And so I guess it bothers me to just think that we're just gonna have to develop everything in Hermantown. I have wildlife in my yard every day, and I think that the wildlife needs a place to go. And the fact that the land is a wetland bothers me. What else do I have to say? It's probably too much. I guess if the cemetery doesn't need the land, well, give it back to my family, I guess is my thought on it, but obviously that's not a conversation for this. Oh, the gas. We got a letter in the mail about 6 weeks ago, maybe, from a neighbor who was proposing for natural gas to go down the road. And he said, the more residents we divide it with, the cheaper it'll be. So I think the fact that everybody's looking into, the city can get money from the sewer, the city can get money from the gas, the city can get money from the water. If you divide this into 12 lots, well, that's a lot of money for the city. So I guess, but at a certain point, people move to Hermantown because they want, quality living and privacy. And I just think that the cemetery is going to get wrecked.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Come on up, please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, Jason Bright, 4962 Hermantown Road. I'm the neighbor to them on the back side behind the cemetery.
Okay.
I got the letter in the mail a couple of weeks ago. I've talked to them since then as well. And one of the things that bothers me on it, the fact that like you have land donated to something, to make it public for anybody, it's given to the cemetery to use. And then now the cemetery, whether they ran out of money because they mismanaged it, whatever their case may be, now the fact that they want to sell it for their own profit doesn't quite make sense. I'd be curious to see if we could dig up, like, even when it was donated, like if there was any, like, what the intent was. There had to be some kind of documentation saying, hey, I'm giving this to you for X amount of years, forever. I'd be curious to see if there's more like behind the scenes and how that all works. And I don't know how any of that works, but I think there should be something. But I'm kind of putting it on with them as well. That just doesn't quite make sense to then change it. If it's public land for the other cemeteries where they own the land and they're trying to sell it, and they always owned it, makes more sense. But it's something that was like given to them. It's like just that's part that's like doesn't quite bode with my in terms of how I would perceive it. That's all I got.
Thank you very much, sir.
Now, I have a question is if there's anybody from the Bethany Cemetery Association here this evening that might be able to shed some light on these things.
Is anybody here this evening representing the cemetery? Sir, if you want to come on up, maybe you can shed a little light on a couple of these questions for us. So I just want to remind you to please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Dennis Delander, 3315 Hutchinson Road in Duluth, and I'm the president of the Bethany Cemetery Association. According to the public records, the most recent conveyance of the land within a period of 24 months prior to the date of this commitment is described as follows. There's a warranty deed from Arthur W. Elliott, a single man, a widower. And that deed was given to the Bethany Cemetery Association, a Minnesota corporation dated June 5th, 1939, and recorded August 9th, 1939 as document number 585450. And to my knowledge then, that would not be a part of Peter Olson's request or bequest to the Bethany Cemetery. That's all I have.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the fact where you might not need the land moving forward? Like Eric said, we've had some requests from other cemeteries for similar stuff and just
Right.
wanted to confirm that that is accurate.
Right now, the cemetery has approximately another 15 to 20 acres of usable lot land up above this 300 feet. And the land that is down below is unusable because right now there is a huge hill that cannot be used for cemetery purposes. And so I cannot see within the next 50, 25, 30 years or whenever that the cemetery would need to have more lot land than what we have. We just finished surveying a hillside. And I think we have, and I'm not positive on the number of lots in that, but I think there's 150 or so. And if you add to that the cremation sites that are available, there's a lot of cemetery available for the burials of cremations and full burials. And in addition, we're planning, if this goes through, we're planning on building another mausoleum because the mausoleums are filling up rather rapidly with cremations. And they're not looking for plot lands for full burials anymore. I don't know. Are there any other questions that I could answer?
I'm by no means an expert in your field or your background, but I'm just curious if you see more and more people being cremated these days and not necessarily needing the large plots.
Absolutely. And the way the state law reads, any existing plot of land with one full burial may have another cremation placed on that lot. And so if you own four full lots, you have enough room for another 4 members of your family. And we have a number of people, of course, who own more than 5 lots. And so we're looking at really no need for full lots anymore. And I think every cemetery is facing the same thing. A lot more cremations. It's cheaper, less land,
Right.
etc.
I think I only have one more question, and it would be on longevity of the existing cemetery if you were allowed to sell off this land, if this could be rezoned and sold. And you said you might have 30 or 40 years. What happens after that point? The cemetery is just full and there's no more admittance?
Well, hopefully not. She's talking about her great grandfather. My grandfather owned land along the Hermantown Road right across the street. And my great great grandfather is buried there. My great great uncle and aunts are buried there. My dad and my uncles, every member of my family are buried in that cemetery. I do not want to see that cemetery full at any time. I have a lot invested into that cemetery.
Okay.
My wife and I will be there in the future.
Commission members, any other questions for this gentleman? I think he's answered mine.
Yeah, I do have a question. Now, the document you have is from a Mr. Elliott in 1939. Is that
Yes.
right? Passing the property to the cemetery?
Correct.
Okay, and no records prior to that.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so I guess my question and where I have a concern here is that if this lady has documentation showing that the land was in fact belonged to her grandfather, great grandfather, if is something written somewhere saying that he's donating it to the cemetery prior to your document, I'm a little concerned about moving ahead on this without some clarification. Because if there's a legal document somewhere saying that, I don't know that, how that would all work here legally, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
And
how can you sell
I'm 87
something?
years old and I
Yeah, I
don't know
hear
what
ya.
happened to prior to
Right,
my birth. But
right.
That cemetery was there when I was born. It
Sure.
was there when my great grandfather was buried there
Mhm.
back in 1913. And so that cemetery is quite old.
Yeah, I just wonder how this Mr. Elliott got his name on the property if it was from the Olson family? That's my
That I don't, know.
question, I guess.
I don't know. I used to chase cows down in there, so
Yeah,
I know the property quite well.
sure.
There's no question that the cemetery owns the land today, correct?
That's correct.
And as part of the, before this would be finalized, the city does what's called an ownership and encumbrances report, just to verify that. To help you out, I mean, this is what we're talking about with agreements, things like that. That's essentially almost the same thing as we see as an HOA, homeowners association. They exist in a handful of areas throughout the city. The city does not enforce those. The city does not dictate those. So in this case, if there's a question of what one descendant said to another, that would be a matter between the two parties, not something that this board of the city would have to take up.
Commission members, any other questions for this gentleman? Anything else you'd like to share with us, sir?
No, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come up and speak this evening? Please come on up, state your name and address for the record.
John Muehlbauer, 3785 Stebner Road. As my wife said, we're the southernmost house that's closest to the property on the same side of the road on the west side.
Yep.
And as far as donation and stuff, I mean, documentation, we'll have to look into that. And I know this isn't the place for it, but right on the website for Bethany Cemetery, if you read the about, Peter Olson's name is the only one on it that says it, that it's donated by him. So that's on a side note. But as far as, you know, my wife said city of quality living. I mean, if we start eating up all these green spaces, it's really neat. There's a web page that I found from University of Minnesota, and there's or aerial photos from 1940, and there's not a house on it. And you can still see the cemetery there. It's really neat stuff. And we're losing a little of that in Hermantown, I think. You talk about, you know, I know it seems far-fetched, but we talk about global warming. What are we doing for our part? And we've always been a prideful city of green space. Yeah, I think it used to be when we built, you had to have an acre to build anywhere in Hermantown, and those things change. We were told that you will be the last flag lot in Hermantown. We were told that by those three gentlemen my wife just talked about, John Clares, and they're since moved on.
Right.
And those things are being done again. I just, you know, I think we tend to slip as a society that we make it easy for everything. And I think it's just the responsibility to not just, I'll make a motion, I'll second, aye. You hear that a lot. Just think about it, you know, because we really value green spaces. Talk about the trail systems that we're trying to get past and all those things. I've walked all that property too. It's gorgeous. And it seems a bit macabre to me to have my backyard right up against a little kid, 7-year-old that my wife was talking about that was killed. And his headstone is right there when you drive in on that driveway. Well, that driveway is the dividing point between the properties we're talking about. I mean, and it's peaceful, and it's, you know, it's Bethany Cemetery. And I think if you put all those houses there, especially if you put 12 houses, somebody's backyard and their trampoline and their pool's going to be back up against that. I just think it's a little disrespectful. So, thank you.
Appreciate that, sir. Anybody else like to come up and speak this evening on 5D? John, could you do me one favor? You're pretty good at math. Could you figure out how many lots you could really put in there with that depth at the overall acreage? Don't they have to be half-acre lots? And with only being 250 feet deep, they're going to be wider than 100 feet on the road.
Yeah, I can help you out. Basically, half acre is 21,500 square feet. If it's a lot depth of 255 and our minimum lot frontage is 100. So essentially you could only divide it that way.
Right.
Because it was, you know, the 255, I mean, you're within 40 feet. So there's no other room that way.
Gotcha.
So like I said, assuming there is no wetland at all on that property, under the straight R3 zoning, the max you could get would be 12 lots.
Right. And we've already established that there is wetlands on the lower, the southern part of that
Exactly, per
property.
the National Wetland Inventory, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Brian Olson, 5280 Midway Road.
Thank
Duluth.
you.
I am cousin to Carol Neubauer. My name is Brian Olson. So I'm a direct Olson. I don't live in Hermantown, so it's not really going to affect me, but it does affect me in that fact that my great grandfather was a big contributor in donating the land. And also both my grandparents, Bernie and Ruby Olson, and my parents, Jim and Jennifer Olson, are buried there. And going there, like Carol said, beautiful, it's peaceful, it's quiet. The last thing I want to hear is kids screaming in the background, having to, whether it's 12 homes or zoned for one big, huge apartment building, you know, it's going to take away from the peace that I get when I visit the cemetery lot. And I'm here to stand with my family on this. Thank you.
Sure. I appreciate your words. Anybody else this evening like to speak on 5D? Yes, ma'am, absolutely. You can retrieve your other picture if you'd like as well.
The letter that I got saying they were rezoning my property. Because the property initially was not surrounded by
Yeah, come on up.
John Muehlbauer, 3785 Stebner Road.
Thank you again.
As far as, and maybe this isn't the place for it, I get it. But, you know, if this goes through, I am curious. You talked about reinvesting in other property for another cemetery. I guess that's I'm a little unclear with those funds, and it would, or maybe it's a mausoleum. Is that?
Yeah, I believe you said it mausoleum.
Is that's
Yep.
what it would be used for sure? Can you say that?
Down below, up on top of the hill.
No, but any profits from any sale of land would be used for that and only that. Is that correct?
That and the improvement of the property itself.
But no other property outside of that cemetery. It's okay. It's Bethany Cemetery improvements only. Is that correct? We can get that in the minutes.
If you read our constitution and bylaws, we have 9 members, none of which get profit from anything that the cemetery does. We are not paid for volunteers. We cannot sell, we cannot buy, we cannot do anything.
Okay.
As far as our own profit.
Okay.
It would all go back into the system.
Okay. Well, I'm still against it. I don't want to see it go through, but I wanted that for the record anyway. Thank you.
Perfect, sir. Thank you again. Anybody else like to come up and talk this evening on 5D? Now's your chance.
Gentlemen, may I speak from remotely?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I was going to check with the Zoom world before we close the public meeting, but go for it.
Just a moment. My name is Peter Miller. I live at 4905 Hermantown Road, directly across the street from the site. And my question is, I want to be clear, does the zoning change that you were talking about, would it allow multifamily or apartment buildings to be built on that strip of land?
Eric can answer this question.
Any zoned land within the city has the ability to become or be a PUD, a planned unit development, commercial districts, residential, et cetera, that way. There's a process that has to go through if something wants to pursue a planned unit development. In this case, what we're looking at is an R3 zoning. It's for single family residential. It also allows 2-family residential. If for some reason in the future, someone bought this and they wanted to pursue something other than that under planned unit development process, they can do that. They are legally able to do that as with any other zoning district in the city. It does require a process, of which is what we're doing tonight. And we've done in other ones. It requires a planning commission and requires city council. So like I said, right now we're just looking at an R3 zoning. I can't speculate in the future. Like I said before, I've not been contacted previously before on this site at all with anybody having an interest in this site. It's not to say that might not change if this was indeed rezoned and put on the market. But if something came forward other than in R3 single family homes, it does come before this board and the city council.
Thank you for that clarification. Hope that answers your question, sir.
It does. I would like to follow up with one thing though. Understanding what was said and that there would be further process associated with any change beyond the single or two residential use of the property. I would just raise the concern that this is a very inconsistent use of that land with the surrounding land uses, surrounding residences, and the cemetery. So that further process, we would be paying very close attention to it. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir. Ma'am, you were coming up again? If you could, you have to please come up and state your name and address. Are you sure? Okay, I just want to make sure. Anybody else want to speak on 5D this evening, either in person or via Zoom? Not hearing or seeing any, we will close the public hearing at 7:51 p.m. Commission members, any questions or comments on 5D this evening?
I just have one more comment. Just to be consistent, as with our last meeting, I think with the review of the comprehensive plan and in terms of rezoning, my personal opinion as a volunteer on a recommending board is that this would be tabled until the comprehensive plan is reviewed.
Okay.
And from my perspective, I'm on the fence on this one. It's really tough. I think we can't read into Mr. Olson's intentions, but I have a feeling when he donated that property to be a cemetery, it was his intention for it to be a cemetery forward. On the other hand, it doesn't make sense to have that property sit there dormant because the cemetery is never going to need it. So I'm struggling here a bit, knowing what's the right thing to do, because I can see both sides. You know, selling off that property makes sense. Put it to use. It benefit the city. On the other hand, if it was Mr. Olson's intention to give it to the cemetery, I can only believe his intention was for it to be a cemetery. And it would be really helpful if maybe we could look back in the records and see if there is anything specifically written as to what his intentions were. And then on the other side, you give a gift, it's a gift, and you give it away and you take control back from whatever happens with it going forward. So I'm struggling with this one and I just don't know. And I guess I'm with Sam. I think maybe we need to put this one on hold and maybe you folks could do some more research and I don't know. I just don't know about this one. I'm struggling.
I guess I'm going to interject right there is, at least from the comp plan standpoint, that's not the nature of the comprehensive plan to look at small individual lots in a case by case basis that way. You're looking at big picture, broad brush sort of things that way. We're looking at 50, 100 acres type of things that way. We're looking at corridors, those things. We're not looking at a 3 or 4 acre or an 8 acre site that way. So I understand your concern that way, but just want to clarify that that's generally not the nature of a comprehensive plan.
So just to clarify too, I do understand that, Eric, and I'm not saying that the comprehensive plan is going to look at this specific agenda item. But in terms of rezoning from public to R3, and you know, one of the things with the public zoning is preserve parks, et cetera. I think that's what would be more important to be looked at, because it's more for me setting the precedent going forward, right? Just as in our last meeting, if every single time someone wants to sell a property to do something different or wants to develop a property because it's zoned differently than what they want to do and they just request it and it happens, to me, that's not, from a planning perspective, that doesn't make sense. So that's my overarching kind of thought process on this.
Well, and respectfully, Commissioner Clark, that is the job of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I mean, our job is to look at lots look at requests, look at how we can preserve property rights. And that's one of the reasons that zoning comes to us in this way. It's not to keep things the same forever. So I think what we're doing today is we're looking at, this is surrounded by R3, right, Eric? You know, even if we had, in my view, even if we had a comprehensive plan, I mean, this would be part of an R3 zoning site. Part of our job too is to value the individual property owner, and the individual property owner here is looking to rezone this in a way that maximizes the value and fits the surrounding area. In the reverse, if the surrounding area was you know, was industrial and it didn't fit, it would be our job to preserve the nature of the surrounding neighborhood. In this case, I would say that from my perspective, we have an R3 area. We are surrounded by R3. We are protecting the property owner's rights to be able to zone consistently with what we're doing in the city. That's where I stand on this, and I'll be voting yay in favor of this one.
I would like to just say, just to follow up on that, I think we might fundamentally disagree on what we're doing on this commission. So my understanding as a volunteer is that if it's just about zoning, it should go right to the city, and I'm ultimately wasting my time because we're not reviewing if something's zoned correctly or not, or meeting requirements as the city puts in the handout. It's more as a volunteer looking at Hermantown as a whole, something can be zoned correctly and it could even be planned correctly, but maybe it doesn't make sense, you know, in the actual day-to-day for the individual residents of Hermantown or who might be impacted. So that's just where I come from when I look at different agenda items as they come forward, because my time's valuable. And I know that the people that come to these meetings' time is valuable. So if it ultimately gets to the point where it just has to be zoned correctly based on what's surrounding it, then I would think I was wasting my time.
No, and I think everyone has, you know, great thoughts, and the family donation, the Mr. Olson gift, I think that's a completely separate matter than what we're here to deal with today, and should be handled elsewhere. You know, when I look at Hermantown as a whole, I personally feel that this fits R3 zoning. Other projects that have come forth, I feel it's been spot zoning. In no way do I feel like this is spot zoning. I haven't got a chance to read through this letter here. But at one point, the house did sit on public land, which was then zoned to R3. It sounds like, if I'm understanding this correctly, to make the house fall under the proper zoning. It seems to be that's kind of what we're doing today, just in a little different nature, 25 years down the road. Green spaces, climate change, not enough schooling, things of that come up a lot. And it's interesting that as a volunteer committee, we're in this room every month and we hear these same things, but yet the people that are concerned about green spaces, schooling, trailing, it just seems to be when it's relevant to something that's right next door to them. So, I mean, when I take a step back and look at this, I'm saying, okay, what's best for our community? I feel like there's a major housing shortage. I feel like it's consistent. It's not spot zoning. And it's something that's very much needed. How many houses are going to go on there? I'm not sure. I'm sure 25 years ago, people might have thought, you know, they were building too close to the cemetery then. As a community or as a society, I guess we're growing every year, and ultimately we're going to consume more and more land. And I don't feel like we're throwing anything inconsistent by letting, you know, right now, single family homes go up in that area.
Commission members, any other open comments or questions?
Well, I guess I would agree with you about it makes sense to rezone it. Practically, it makes sense to rezone it because everything around it is R3. But my heart is saying, I don't know that I could vote for it tonight until we're given the opportunity for these folks to do a little bit more research as to what the original intent was for this property. Maybe it doesn't need to be cemetery, but maybe it could be something else that would fall more in line with what the original donation was, rather than housing units.
And I guess to me personally, you know, when I show up, I'm trying to do what's best for the community and the growth. And this is a very bad situation. I feel horribly for you guys. I'm sure that was the intent, but based off the information provided, who currently owns it, I'm looking at everything big picture, and that's kind of where I guess I feel comfortable, approving this tonight.
The ballpark and the addition that my kid, we're talking everything. So saying we only come here to the fact is, I think.
Commission members, any other questions or comments?
Eric, is there any evidence of any cloud to title at this point?
I'm
Have we
sorry,
heard
say
of any-
again?
Have we heard of any cloud to title? Is there any restriction?
No, but at this stage, we've not looked at that.
Okay.
It's an ownership and encumbrances report that we'll do prior to the city
Yeah.
council that way. And once again, as I said before, someone's gift to somebody, we don't get into those things.
Yeah. So that'd be a personal property matter, not for the planning and zoning.
Mr. Chair, my only comment too is I think, Shannon, you had mentioned about setting a precedence. I think we kind of did with the other cemetery that we rezoned a couple months back. So, I just think we should remember that when we're thinking about.
Yeah, and that one we rezoned to commercial. Right? Yeah.
Actually, if we can get people to come up to the
Yeah,
podium, we
you
are
gotta come on
recording
up.
this for minutes, please.
And we'll,
Jason Bright for 962 Hermantown Road. For the other cemetery, you guys talked about the rezoning commercial. How did they acquire that land originally?
We don't know that, and that's
Yeah.
not what this body is here to
Yeah.
determine.
Okay. So are we putting it on the person that purchased the land when they do the title, like the title search and all that kind of stuff to figure out that portion of it?
All that we look at is if the applicant owns the property,
correct.
they're the ones we deal with. That's what we deal with. We don't get into, my ancestor said this, their ancestor said that. We don't look at that. We deal with the owner of the property making the request.
I'm not talking about what they said or, anything like that. It's just, how did they acquire the land? If you acquire the land via purchasing it and then you go.
We don't get in, this body does not get into that.
Okay, that's maybe valid. It just doesn't seem correct. The only thing I'd add to that.
Thank you for those additional comments. Commission members, anything else we'd like to talk about on this application 5D this evening? I myself, I've listened to all the kind words this evening. I can hear it, that it's personal to you guys. I also believe that the cemetery's got the right to sell off the land if they want to, if they're the legal owners today. There are multiple homes directly across the street. It's an R3 district. I personally don't have a problem with this. Any other comments or questions, anybody, before we put it to a vote this evening? Not hearing any, I look for a motion on 5D this evening.
Thomas Tony moves to approve 5D as stated.
We have a motion to approve. Can we get a second?
Colquist with the second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Aye.
You were for? 1, 2, 3, 4. So the vote is 5-2 this evening. I believe the motion passes. Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate all your time on that. Number 6 is continuing business. Eric, do we have any?
No, there's not, but just to give an update, the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee is going to be having its first meeting a week from tonight. Anticipate probably being back in front of this board with an update at our October meeting. Provide some information and where our consultant is in the process. And anticipate sometime probably in November, maybe December, the consultant would be up here speaking personally to this board as well.
Thank you for that. Any new business under number 7?
No.
Eric, can we talk a little bit about maybe on the continuing business, the Ingwalls property and the action taken last night? If you haven't heard, the city council approved the rezoning of the Ingwalls property. to C commercial. The process didn't come easy. I abstained from the vote, as my employer does some work for PNR properties. So, it was 4-0 with the vote and with myself abstaining. But the one thing I know this body has a concern about, what if the deal falls through with PNR? And maybe Eric, can you just explain and we've all been through this and we know what the process is if a commercial development wants to go in, but maybe just explain, now that is C commercial, everybody seems to be concerned. Can you just explain the process of what's going to happen or how it will happen?
Sure, exactly. So under the commercial district, I believe there's either 56 or 58 basically permitted uses under what's called a commercial industrial development permit. So what that requires is review and approval by this body. So this is one of the things that that you are actually the approving body on, not a recommending body. So what it requires, regardless of what it is generally a full set of engineering plans, looking at architectural renderings, site plans associated with that. Depending on the scope and the scale of the project, there may be other documents associated with it, i.e. environmental documents, traffic studies, etc. that way. Once again, that all depends on the scope and the scale of a particular project that way. So in the case now that this is a commercially zoned property, like I said, the planning commission will be the deciding vote for projects coming in at that stage. Once again, there's approximately 56 different permitted uses under that CIDP, which require a number of different elements associated with it. And once again, for your review, and there is a public hearing associated with that, as well as a public notification to adjoining property owners upon an application.
I thank you. I just want to make sure everybody was aware of what stands in front of this commission to look at moving forward with that property.
When will that happen? Do we know yet?
Unknown.
No.
It's we're starting looking at some working with a consultant named Ellers that does a lot of financial research. Looking at the viability of that project, at least from the applicant standpoint. It's really in their court now from an application standpoint. And not really quite sure when that would happen, but there are different steps that go through. Now in the case, assuming it's a PNR project, if there's any public subsidies, if there's any public utilities, i.e. roads, water, sewer, etc., that require development agreements, those are basically approved by the city council. Development agreement typically does not stop at this level. It goes straight onto a city council that way. But once again, this board from really the plan standpoint is the approving body. Does that help?
Sort of. I'm now more confused.
Okay.
So I
Zone commercial, we could approve it and it's done.
Okay.
Right.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, take an example of
We'll use the North Shore Dental that came through here 2 months ago.
Right.
That was the one stop.
Yep.
They provided essentially 80% construction drawings from their engineer. They provided architectural renderings associated with it, stormwater plans, etc. that way. And the body reviews those plans, here's that, opens it up to public comment, receives those, and then makes a decision on the process or on the project that way. We look at it, does it meet the underlying requirements of the C zoning, i.e. setbacks, heights, etc., amount of land area for buildings. Those are some of the criteria that we look at that way. We don't get into architectural. We say, I don't like that color stone. I don't like that color siding. That's not the nature of what we do. So in the commercial zoning, it's pretty well open as far as building materials that way. In the Hermantown marketplace, that's a different story. There's actually set materials that it speaks about in there. Under the straight C zoning, it's no real requirements that way.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay.
And Eric, is there limits to the scopes of this body and review at that next step? Like as long as it fits within certain requirements of the statute, we're in a duty to approve or deny based upon how it fits in there? Or is it, how much latitude does this commission have?
It does say it removes a lot of the subjectivity associated with it. In a planned unit development, for instance, lot more latitude for this commission to make comments, make requirements, et cetera, that way. Commercial zoning, a little bit more cut and dried that way. Said before, there's no landscape requirements, there's no building material type of requirements. We look into setbacks, we look into building heights, we look into parking lot ratios, we look into percent pervious on a parking lot surface that way. So we're really looking at pretty much the facts associated with it.
Thanks, Eric. That was, I just wanted everybody to know.
Sure.
What was moving forward. So thanks.
Number 7 or number 8 is communications. Looks like we have some laud correspondence.
Yes, this was actually a document that was provided to city council 2 weeks ago from one of the property owners along Okerstrom Road. So we still just put that into the log correspondence and wanted to make planning and zoning aware of that.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Number 9 is commission member reports. Myself, nothing this evening. Mr. Colquist?
I guess just thanks for everyone for their input tonight. It's nice that we're not always yay or nay on, across the board. So I thought there was great discussion and honestly liked hearing everyone's opinions and thoughts on the matter. So I guess just thanks for that.
I agree, discord's important. It's good for us to disagree and
Mhm.
that's why we're all here and that's why it's not just one vote. So.
Valerie Roulette? Samuel Clark?
I'll report.
Beth Wenzloff? Buckley Simmons? Dante Tomasani?
Report.
Counselor Geisler?
I think this was the first one we had this situation of grandpa donating the land. Well, no, he didn't. Mr. Elliott donated the land. I mean, that's kind of crazy. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. The way I look at it though, even if Mr. Olson donated the land, they're taking the proceeds from that to better the cemetery. So I think, those gentlemen aren't lining their pockets with it. So I think, and again, yeah, I mean,
You did.
we're here to do
Right.
zoning work. So I think, I understand everybody's position, but I think moving forward was the right thing. So other than that, community recreation and initiative that Mr. Muehlbauer was talking about, that he's been making phone calls. There's lots of different groups going around trying to, get community support to vote, vote yes for the hockey rink expansion trails and the baseball field project. So just everybody keep in mind that as you're talking to people in the community, all 3 could pass, 2 could pass, or just 1 could pass, and the amount of the sales tax increase is the same at 0.5%. So there's a lot of misperception out there that I'm going to vote for each thing and it's 0.5% for a total of 1.5%. Not true. It is, if you're talking to people, if 1 passes or all 3, it's 0.5% of increase. So, and it sunsets after 20 years, if I recall. That 20 years is the most. So, anyways, that's. But there will be a lot of community push on that. The city provides information. The city can't promote the project, the vote. They can provide information. There was a mailer that went out from the city to everybody with specific information. There are other groups now being involved that you may get some more information from as well. But the city can only provide information, and that's what the city's trying to do. So I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Counselor Geisler. With that, I look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you for that. Can we get a second?
Colk was for the second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is closed at 8:13 PM. Thank you very much, everybody.
You non-hockey players.